Political leaders from both sides of the aisle are weighing in. Some Democrats are now openly questioning whether it's too late to replace President Biden on the ticket. We heard from former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and current Speaker Mike Johnson this afternoon.
What do you say to Democrats who feel that there should be another nominee after the president's debate
I'll
performance
make
last
a
night?
statement about this, but not right now. Yeah.
How do you think he did?
Compared to a person who was lying the whole time.
There was only one man on that stage who is capable and qualified of being elected president in the next term, and his name is Donald J. Trump.
Governor Newsom was at the debate in Atlanta last night, and he was live tweeting during the entire thing and defended Biden to reporters when it wrapped up.
I've spent a lot of time with him. I know Joe Biden, I know what he's accomplished in the last 3.5 years. I know what he's capable of, and I know his vision, and I have no trepidation.
This guy has no sense.
The second and final presidential debate before the election is scheduled for September 10th.
And to help break this down and end the debate and what this means as we move forward to November, joining us live now is Occidental College professor Carolyn Heldman. Professor, most of the time these debates are about optics rather than substance. So what is the potential impact of this debate on the upcoming presidential election?
Well, typically debates don't matter much, and you're right, they're all about optics. People rarely remember all of the numerous topics that are brought up, and especially for candidates like these two, whom we've known for a long time. They've both been president. We know what they stand for. We know their temperament. But I think last night, in terms of style, this was catastrophic for Joe Biden. I actually think that it shifted the election dramatically in the sense that he had a lot of ground to make up to begin with, and Biden needed to show up and show that he was strong and not capitulate to this framing of him as weak and senile. I didn't see cognitive decline last night, but he was certainly trailing off and lost his way at certain points. He was mumbling, he was looking down. I think for Biden, he needs to be really concerned about the fact that in the minds of many Americans, it actually became a question of whether or not he's fit to hold the office.
And there are some in the Democratic Party who are now worried about President Biden's showing. And the one person front and center was California Governor Gavin Newsom. Is that coincidence or is that potential strategy, him being there?
Well, certainly Newsom is basically making himself a great candidate for 2028. Or if something happens to Biden in this election, he's using his position of a surrogate to get his name out there. Of course, if the Democrats do decide to take this very unusual move, it would and replace Biden. That would require Biden essentially to throw his support either to release his delegates in August at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. He could release them before then. He could swing them to a candidate. And Newsom certainly in the running, along with Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Gretchen Whitmer, and a few others.
So much is being said about what Biden lost in this debate. But what did former President Trump gain from this?
Well, we didn't see much new from Trump. What we saw is just constant lies. And as a political scientist who studies history, I find him to be unfit for office and that he inspired a violent insurrection on January 6th. I know a lot of people don't hold that belief, but I don't think we learned anything new about Trump last night. I think he did an excellent job, though, of kind of staying nice and mellow and calm, even though you could see it on his face as Biden was poking the bear many times, calling him, a whiner, calling him a loser, talking about having sex with a porn star, saying maybe my favorite line of the night that he had the morals of an alley cat. I mean, when do you hear that in a presidential debate? But Trump stayed the course. He did exactly what he needed to do, which was to appear like someone who's not going to lose his temper over little things.
And a lot of major rulings coming down today from a conservative leaning U.S. Supreme Court. Could that have an impact on voters heading into this election?
I think it could. I think the cases that would have the biggest impact would be the abortion case. And that was a case decided a few days ago, and the Supreme Court decided to both allow late term or abortions in the case of a woman's health, not just her life, in Idaho. So they punted on that. They didn't actually make a ruling on the substance of it. The same with the mifepristone case. They delayed both of these cases until likely after the election. I think abortion is a really damaging issue for Republicans, since 85% of Americans support abortion in some circumstances. I think the cases that will have the biggest impact, though, are this gutting of the Chevron doctrine that allows the federal government to make decisions and check corporations. It's not just that decision, it's also the SEC decision, the EPA decision. There's a package of cases that essentially erodes the federal government's ability to check corporations when they put profits above people. Those aren't sexy cases, so I don't think those will affect the election, but they're certainly going to affect the American people moving forward.
Well, always great to hear from you and hear your expertise. Carolyn Heldman from Occidental College, thanks for joining us.